Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to my third favorite nostalgia box here today. We're talking about Resident Evil Outbreak, a game that I replay every few months because it constantly falls into the PTSD portion of my brain that causes me to forget the stuff that was horrific about it and try it again. I love this game. At the times that I don't hate this game, but I would love to see it remade. Remade ideally. Re-released with its online functionality ideally, but what I want to propose here today is kind of an alternative scenario, an alternative what-if scenario to Outbreak. Something of a alternate timeline of a time we never got. Because Capcom, years ago, had essentially had this idea that they want to port one of their big things over to from the PS2 over to the PSP, and the choices were Monster Hunter or Resident Evil Outbreak, and eventually they ended up going with Monster Hunter, and the result was stuff like Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. And so immediately before we even get talking about the rest of the features and whatever else, for the naysayers out there that will immediately say, oh my god, it's a PS2 game, the PSP can't run it, these types of ports were exceedingly common on the PSP, many of which ended up improving on the originals. Again, with Monster Hunter Freedom Unite apparently being an improvement on one of the PS2 Monster Hunter games. We had stuff like Armored Core, which saw 3 of its PS2 games make it over to the PSP, in my opinion, being vast improvements over the original PS2 versions. You know, improved load times, improved visibility because you could actually see to your sides, adding new parts and fights, fixing a lot of bugs. Oh my god, Silent Line originally had a lot of bugs. So either way, they improved a ton of games this way. Some of them were more downgrades, some of them were more side grades. Like there was a very frequent thing of the PSP sequel, or the PSP side port, is what some people called them. Like some of those were technically downgrades, like Battlefront 2. I love Battlefront 2, but they took out my favorite map. Funnily enough, a fan mod later added that back in, and it could run that map just fine. So I don't know why they took it out. But yeah, overall, we saw a lot of those like side ports, stuff like, let's say, Liberty City Stories, which ended up essentially combining together Vice City and San Andreas features into its own game. And frankly, I love those kinds of things. I love when you want to essentially keep that old thing, you wanted to have that Vice City setting, you wanted to do more stuff with it, and they can just sort of do a director's cut, revisit the ideas that they never got to revisit mechanically, even if the story is technically different. And I love those kinds of things. It's one of those reasons that the PS2/PSP library just absolutely sings to me on a spiritual level. I love those things. But that alternate reality there, that one where we got the Resident Evil Outbreak PSP port, that's what I want to discuss here today. I want to talk about what that might have looked like, what that might have potentially entailed, because this game is an absolute fascinating anomaly of a thing. So let's explain what Outbreak even is, because a lot of folks will probably immediately either have opinions or misunderstandings, okay? Outbreak was marketed as that time that Resident Evil decided to do a multiplayer. It was the first time that they decided to do multiplayer, and to this day, the hacked version of the Japanese game is still more popular than their actual official outings for the whole rest of the series, according to some accounts combined. So, either way, people liked this. But why did they like this? Because Resident Evil Outbreak is in many ways the dream classic Resident Evil game, essentially allowing you to go into a Resident Evil game while essentially having it be a sort of free-form format where you can explore at your own whims, you can enter through alternate means, you can help out your buddies. Those situations that we had in our heads back from Resident Evil 1, those moments where, depending on what floors or rooms you went to, different stuff might happen to Barry, except having that happen in real time, in just like essentially having that happen freeform with whatever characters you like. Because this game not only had the starting 8 characters that are kind of canon in these scenarios, but you additionally can use something like 100 different NPCs from this game and others to actually put into your team, and all of them are actually fleshed out in terms of their relationships, is the crazy part. And that's actually where we're going to go ahead and start, which is the information that's actually provided to the characters. Because we have to address 2 things. First of all, the File 2 changes, and why this is the version that I'm specifically using as a sort of sample here, not File 1, and additionally, the information it doesn't tell you about the characters that you're actually playing as, okay? We'll get into the gameplay and stuff like that towards the tail end of this thing, but we're going to talk about a few things here. First of all, these scenarios. I'd be shocked if these scenarios were not planned to have something similar to Twisted Metal Head-On. Namely that you go in, like you start off at Outbreak in the first one. Like, you have a choice over whether or not to do the tutorial, and then from there, you just basically branch out into the different locations depending on the endings that you got. Like, if you decided to blow up the zombies at the very end, maybe you wandered over to Wild Things. If you decided to escape in the van, maybe instead you wound up in Underbelly or something like that. I forget exactly how they all connect into each other, but these scenarios actually have different endings, and those different endings connect with other scenarios. They just never tied that stuff together. So, right off the bat, if we're seeing a sort of PSP port / modern, kind of remake, but we're cutting out the multiplayer type of situation. I know, don't yell at me, I will validate this. I would expect that we would again see something similar to Twisted Metal Head-On, where we see the scenarios able to be either chosen freeform, to go from scenario to scenario to scenario and just kind of have like one entire campaign playthrough that way, or potentially just have them connect via their endings, because it's not like this is an insanely long game. It's effectively the last few hours before Raccoon City gets vaporized, but the way that these scenarios interact with each other is really freaking cool. Like, I love that after going through all the trouble to get the subway working in Underbelly, you can actually just miss the subway and then wind up at the RPD station. So either way, great stuff there. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the File 2 changes here real quick, okay? So, File 2, to explain what happened. They originally had planned to have something like 40 scenarios. They ended up having to cut it down to 10 main scenarios with like 40 different variations, and then also I should say like 4 variations each, give or take, along with a few randomized events that could happen differently in every one of those scenarios. And additionally, they also had other modes that go on in the background. Like, I don't have them all unlocked on this playthrough yet, but stuff like elimination modes, where you're basically like running through and gunning down enemies, boss rushes, stuff like that. So those are kind of weird little goober side projects, but either way, it's cool that they're there. So essentially, what we see with these different scenarios is that they're all going to be a very, very distinct setting, and oftentimes are going to be very detailed in their environments. Now, before we talk about everything else, let's go ahead and get the hardware stuff out of the way. Could the PSP even handle Outbreak? Funnily enough, yes. Now, I'm not talking about through emulation or whatever else. For those unfamiliar with a lot of PSP ports, that thing loved to punch above its weight class, and we actually have direct evidence that this would have been ported just fine, because Freedom Unite is on there, Peace Walker is on there, both of which are using the same, I'm fairly certain, engine as this one does, because Capcom had this thing where they're like, okay, we want to make super detailed environments, we want to make enemies that take locational damage and stuff like that on a PS2 / eventually PSP, so how do we do that with limited hardware? Well, we take this big map, we chunk it up into rooms, and then make it so that there's just loading screens between like little curves nearby a beach, going through a cave, climbing up a vine. You just do a little animation, you do a little load screen, and then bada bing bada boom, you're in a new room. But all of the data for those different creatures carries through from room to room. And so this means that you can actually go from area to area and have enemies follow you. In fact, one of the features, and many of the features that later Resident Evil games even would end up getting credited with and would end up getting praised for, that started here. Like, for example, enemies following you from room to room, that wasn't an RE2R thing, that happens here. Yes. As far as like holding down doors so that your allies can escape, that is just one hell of a cool moment to have happen. Stuff like your allies actually coming in to help you and whatnot happens pretty frequently. And in fact, that's actually one of those details that I want to mention before we even go into gameplay here real quick, which is relationships. All these characters have different relationships with each other and different personality types, including the many, again, like 100-ish NPCs here. So with all of these different characters, sometimes when you order commands, because you basically give out commands, sometimes they'll listen, sometimes they won't. And depending on who they are, this can mean different things. Like, for example, if anyone ever had David on their team, he will pretty much immediately fuck off and not help you almost every time. The reason for this is not because the AI is being cruel, but because this guy is extremely antisocial. He's a handyman that prefers to stick to himself. And they mention this in the manual. They mention this in some random lore background stuff. The thing is, a lot of the information on these characters is never mentioned. So what I would have loved to see in a port, first and foremost, mention their actual like relationships with people, because if you hit information here, it will give you your out of 100% completion score over how many events you interacted with in the stage, but it doesn't tell you jack shit about what the characters' relationships are, like who's going to listen to them. Nobody likes David. David doesn't like them. That's more or less what it works like. Cindy, the nice pretty lady, yeah, everybody will agree with her. Everyone will listen to her commands and stick around to protect her. The ace cop over here will always show up to help because he just really wants to help. Meanwhile, Mark is one of my favorites because he is super stubborn. Dude's an old war vet. So if you give him almost any command, he'll basically tell you to fuck off. And then if you ask him to help you, he'll be like, no, and then he'll come up, he'll body block the hit for you, and then start blasting away. Because he is there to help you. He wants to help you, but like hell is he going to take commands from a child? I love that, dude. So yeah, it's really good stuff. Like, you got Jim, who will show up to do a sneak attack every now and then, but otherwise he'll just run off. You got George, who I picked as a partner earlier. Because of recently playing through a end of the line scenario, and in that scenario, he ended up doing this crazy thing where he so I got knocked into a critical state and was also bleeding. Okay, this was about as fucked as you can get because there was a tyrant a few feet away charging up basically a kill move. Like, you know that one scene where it's like, oh no, it's a kill shot, he turned it sideways? That is a lot of enemies in this game. As soon as they start winding up, you either run or you die. But anyways, as far as George goes, he's physically not very imposing. He does have this kind of charge up tackle move that's pretty good, but he's weird to use, he's slow, but he's one of my favorite AI companions to have because not only does he always want to help, his healing gun that he was given in this one is exceptionally good. So like in that case, I was basically screwed, right? One normal hit away from death, one fatal hit away from death. Bleeding puts you into a state where you're limping even if you're not on critical, so there was no getting out of that situation. I hit the help button. Just yell help real quick. George kicks down the door, whips out his healing gun, hits me with a hemostat to cure the bleeding, hits me with a cure pill to put me into yellow caution, runs up and pushes me out of the way. Ends up taking the hit and dying, but I'm like, man, that is a heroic story. I'm going and sharing forever. That is amazing. But that's the thing. The AI is capable of really smart things. They're programmed to roleplay, not to do the sort of traditional optimal routing or whatever else. Okay. They will do stupid things occasionally for the purpose of immersion, and that's just cool as hell to me. Okay, I love that. So if this game were to come out in a form that caused it to not have its multiplayer anymore, I would like to know more about that mechanic. I would like to have that information on there, and additionally, I would hope that they would have a page, if at least a page, ideally a better tutorial that broke down what each character does, because right now the only tutorial in the game is in the second game, and additionally is basically a tutorial that gives you some basic movement controls, which you can hopefully figure out on your own, while also giving you a one file notice of what the manual says about the character. So, like, for example, in her case, they're like, oh, she carries a lockpick. You know, she's able to lockpick doors. She is a master of unlocking, as it were. And it's like, that doesn't really tell you much. Oh, just pick a lock, and certain locks will be... There we go. Thank you, healing gun guy. You're amazing. Anyway, whoops. I am screwing this up entirely right now. Thank you. Okay. So. Yeah, this dodge move is really useful whenever you're in bleeding. It's one of the reasons I like using Alyssa, because, like, her dodge move is pretty fantastic. Ignore the terrible play, I'm just trying to show that her route is different if she goes to this door. Because she's a very frail character, but she does have a lot of potential openings, depending on where you are. Like everybody else, it would be forced to go through that door. Meanwhile, we can just go ahead and lockpick our way through this one. Cancel. Zap. That probably won't be enough to do him in. There we go. Zap that man, unequip this thing so that we can go back to tackling, actually face the door this time. Anyway, the logistics of this game are one of those things that I find infinitely fascinating, because again, it's like a free-form version of a regular Resident Evil game. Where you can approach doors as you will, you can tell your companions to do things as you will. Sometimes they'll listen, sometimes they won't, and the stubbornness of certain characters, the helpfulness of certain characters, it leads to a lot of personality. And again, if we had a better explanation, like maybe even something like an XCOM 2 style, you know, like great relationship, terrible relationship kind of thing, would be nice. And the thing is, there's actually even more to it, because they actually remember the things that you do. So like, if you offer somebody a healing item, they will remember that. If you go and save somebody when they're critical, they will remember that. If you offer somebody a weapon, they will remember that. And over time, your relationships can actually improve. Hey, buddy. Bye, buddy. But yeah, so this was sort of the dream Resident Evil game for me personally. This is the one that I always wanted. This is exactly the kind of thing that I always wanted. And I always wished that we could, again, see a port of it. The thing is, I specifically wanted to see a port of everything about File 2, but potentially the scenarios from File 1 brought in. See, we have this awkward thing when it came to the releases on this one. Where in a lot of different ways, we had a lot of story things that worked potentially a bit better in File 1, including a lot more varied endings. The final scenario had something like 46 endings, I think it was, depending on people's virus condition by the time they got to the end of the outbreak, depending on whether or not they cured themselves, whether they brought a cure to the outside world, whether they cured their allies. And so you had situations like you have Jim the subway worker and Kevin the cop, and they're just kind of sitting around and basically resigned themselves to death at the end, because they know they didn't get cured, but the cure managed to get out, so they're about to go do their last stand, and so as they're kind of sitting there waiting to do their last fight, as it were, Jim's complaining that that it had to be him, that he didn't have one of the ladies that survived with him. He's like, oh, don't get yourself worked up. You're just gonna make yourself more hungry. Anyways, though, there's a ton of different endings depending on the characters, and that's just, again, a ton of fun. Now, with that all being said, here,
Mark! Over here!
Dang it, you stubborn bastard. Come on, let me help you. Here, take your medicine, old man. Like, again, I love the stubbornness of this dude, because oftentimes he will refuse to use healing items. Also, he has so much health that even a full heal doesn't actually full heal him. There's actually a lot of information that I'm pretty sure is wrong about this game out there. Like, for example, Alyssa can take a green herb and in most cases wind up back in green. Mark can take a full heal like he just did and just wind up a yellow. A lot of the stuff that I see mentions that there are percentage heals, which does not sound right at all. Shoot. I'm not using the right lockpick for this door for sure. Blast the zombie in the dick. Oh, hang on. Blast the zombie in the dick. This is not what you should be doing at this point, for sure. But this is a way that you can potentially get yourself more stuff later in the level, believe it or not. Anyways, whatever. We'll go back to discussing at this point, because there's more things that I want to discuss. So, ideally, we'd see all of the features from File 2 making it to this game. Now, what were those features? You saw a lot of them already. Being able to move and shoot is a game changer, especially for fast enemies, where you have stuff like dogs, like birds, stuff that is classically annoying as hell to fight. And part of the reason that I have a different save file over here from later in that scenario, where you actually can properly aim at those things without having to stop, aim, because that stuff would get you killed very easily, especially on the harder difficulties. Being able to kind of auto aim while moving is very, very good. So here, like right here, we have her with a pistol here. Let's go ahead and go this way. And just to show that there's a few dogs that are hanging outside this office here. So I don't believe I mentioned this detail as of yet, but as you progress through the scenario, everything is consistently getting worse. And I don't mean the virus meter. I mean every area is progressively getting more and more infested with various types of enemies of various kinds. Sometimes it's a mixed group, like there's a hallway here that has hyenas, that has a lion that chases you, that has frickin' macaws that attack you from above, and if you don't know how to dodge, you are absolutely fucked. Again, a lot of people get filtered out by normal, let alone hard mode, let alone very hard mode, at which point it just loves to see you suffer in agony. But like these dogs, whenever they start running around, like this guy's about to, there we go, they can be very hard to hit if you couldn't move and shoot. So that is very, very useful. But either way, that's one of those features. The other one you saw earlier, which is the starting item. So every character in File 2 gets a starting item that better emphasizes the stuff that they do. Like, in her case, she gets that taser, which gives her another interaction with the map, because not only does she have a, essentially, stun gun, a relatively low power but high stun type of weapon, but also it gives another use for batteries, which previously were just used for crafting weapons. You have, let's say, somebody like David that starts off with a lighter, and you might have seen that can of bug spray that was available on the counter. He would be able to combine that with a lighter in order to make himself a portable flamethrower. Let's say in her case she carries a charm that prevents instant kills, so those charge-up attacks I was talking about earlier. You've got Cindy here, whose one of whose endings in the first game was her tying a tourniquet on a dying guy on the escaping helicopter. So she essentially carries a tourniquet with her in File 2 in order to basically show that, hey, she knows how to do this, she can stop bleeding, and doesn't get the bleeding status. Kevin's whole thing is that he brings a magnum to every fight. Technically, not a full-fledged magnum. It is the 1911, which is arguably the coolest freaking... Not arguably, it is objectively the coolest freaking gun ever made. But it uses custom ammo, which means that you only have, in most cases, one reload for the thing. So in his case, what we have is that he'll bring an extra magazine with him, and you might have noticed earlier, you reload bullets one at a time. Unless you get a magazine and you load that with bullets, then you can do the usual quick reload. The logistics of how you reload your weapons is actually surprisingly important in this game. Somebody like Mark will carry a extra magazine for a pistol. Because that pistol is on his belt at all times, he doesn't have to use an inventory slot for one of the most utilitarian weapons in the game, and so this means that he can carry that magazine with him, reload it whenever he runs into a box of handgun bullets, and essentially always be ready to go, rather than carrying around a larger stack of handgun bullets and reloading slowly. It saves him time, it saves him inventory space, it's surprisingly practical. Somebody like Jim will carry 2 lucky coins with him, which allow him to give himself a critical multiplier. I mentioned earlier how there were RPG mechanics. In many ways this could be seen as an action RPG, and this guy is kind of the rogue of the bunch. He automatically knows where a lot of items are on the map. They show up as question marks instead of actual item notifications, but they give an idea over where to actually find things if you, let's say, forgot where you might have left stuff behind. So he's better at navigating, he can crawl through vents other people can't crawl through, and additionally, because he can multiply his crits and attack with combos using different weapons, he's very good at burst damage. Arguably the strongest possible hit that you could do in the game is taking Jim, getting heads on his coins, and then taking I think it was a sledgehammer or a spear that David can craft, and then getting essentially a chain crit with that thing, which, functionally speaking, can burst down a boss like nothing. You got George here, who combines different herbs into different kinds of medicine, so he's basically the doctor of the bunch. You got David, that's basically MacGyver. You got... again, lockpick lady from over here. You got this lady who ends up having extra inventory space. They all have an ability, they all have an extra item that they start with, and all of the NPCs will copy their abilities, but they will also similarly carry a different item with them, depending on who you choose and depending on who they are. Like, let's say Jim typically starts with that coin, which is pretty good, but he doesn't start off with a weapon, so he has to find one. Let's say we go over to one of the RPD members that is a Jim type, so John over here, and in his case he actually starts with a pipe instead. So he still can multiply his crits, but instead of having a second crit multiplier, he carries a pipe. And so let's say you combine him with let's say, going into an area like the subway, where you might find a concrete chunk around relatively quickly, and then let's say you bring a David type to the group, who then can combine those two into a very powerful sledgehammer. The way that you can use all of these different characters is potentially very, very interesting, not only from a roleplay perspective, but from a gameplay perspective. The problem here is that there's not enough information on any of these people. What do they look like? What is their starting ability? All of that is not located here. You can't tell what their starting item is. You can, however, go over to the collection log and go over to your unlocks and find out stuff there. It's like, let's say we go over here, and it's like, oh, for Cindy, you just unlocked her Playboy outfit. You know, for your other types, we got Marvin over here, so we unlock him separately, or we unlock several of the RPD members separately. Which, by the way, Jim is absolutely the epitome of what it feels like to be coming off of third shift. Dude comes into every round just limping. He's actually just a random injured cop that's in the background of one of the scenes there. So it's interesting that you actually run into all these characters in different ways, but I guess they figured they would just reuse their models in different ways. But again, it's like 100 different characters you can get this way, which is pretty darn neat. And they usually come in groups. Like this is the 3 from the first Outbreak scenario, who basically everyone except for the guy on the right ends up dead because the guy in the middle ends up fumbling the thing that they're building. The guy on the left gets distracted, telling him off for the thing that he's fumbling, gets himself bit after the middle guy gets bit, and then the guy on the right panics and runs away. Anyway, so yeah, these guys are all just like, these were all the random people from that first Outbreak that were just sort of like random cops doing part of the last stand. You had these guys over here that were all part of the RPD's last stand in terms of the actual building itself. So yeah, it's cool that that stuff's there. I just wish that it was actually available in the menu itself. It's really weird that you can't go to those characters and see what they look like. So I would have expected that would be one of them. I would have expected to see stats on the menu because those are very important. Things like most of the girls not being particularly good with weapons. Like Alyssa's pretty good. Yoko actively does less damage even with bullets. That is important information to have. So it would be nice to know what their proficiencies actually are, just so you know what to do. Like, it's not only the way that they act, because they all behave differently to recoil of different guns and stuff like that. Like, she is really slow when firing a gun, she's relatively slow in aiming, and additionally, again, just like does less damage with it. And it would be, again, good to see stats on the screen here. I would love to see profiles for those NPCs, and inventory preview would be very useful, because she can hold more items at once. Great. That doesn't say anything about the charm she carries, that doesn't say anything about the crawl move that she has. More information, please. Okay. And again, relationships. How do they relate to each other? How do these characters like each other? Again, like everyone will listen to the nice waitress lady. Some people will listen to the shy student. Alyssa. What's interesting is all of the secondary abilities that these guys have. They have the ability to do them for you, to assist you in different scenarios. But those relationships seem to determine whether or not they'll do that. Like, for example, let's say you go out with the main cast, right? And let's say you're playing as Mark. He ends up getting injured. Again, like, Kevin will be right there to go and immediately attack. Let's say he asks for help with unlocking a door. Alyssa will say no and leave. Unless, let's say, she gets injured and gets saved. She gets given items. She gets healed. She gets given weapons. And then, eventually, you'll start noticing that there's drawers left unlocked, that there's suddenly doors left unlocked. It's not like she remembers the command to unlock those things. She seems to just sort of start unlocking things in the background to be nice. Again, I don't know the full extent of how that all plays out, because some of that stuff I've legit seen in guides and retrospectives and whatever else saying that they can't happen, and some of those I would agree on. Like, for example, there's no situation that I've ever seen in which I can get Mark to go push something. Naturally, he's the only one strong enough to, let's say, push a golf cart or push a giant box. Otherwise, you'd need 2 people, and the AI does not assist in pushing something outside of the very first scenario of the very first game. It would be nice to see that fixed, because there's a lot of cases where pushing is a potentially important mechanic. Either way, it would be cool if they actually helped with that, but normally you just play as Mark to go push those boxes. So I would love to see that the AI potentially listens to more commands, and I would assume that would be possible. Again, in many PSP ports, I know it's a different company, different engine, different everything, but as a bit of an example, when looking at the Armored Core PSP ports, we did see a situation wherein the AI actively improved how it did things. It was made so that it doesn't fly out of bounds nearly as often. It's typically a lot less cheesable, it's less aggressive, but more roleplay focused, and that's really good in my opinion. So it typically was a lot more consistent in the stuff that it did. Anyway, so on top of that, if we're assuming that there's not going to be online mode coming back to this version because it would require too much effort, what I would love to see is the sort of online randomizer mode. So from what I understand, the way that the online worked is that it took every one of these different scenarios, and it took the different difficulties, which I don't have the final difficulty unlocked yet on this playthrough. But you've got 4 difficulties, as well as several modifier difficulties. So you've got easy, normal, hard, and very hard, all of which are going to have different stuff play out, different item locations, and further, they'll have some randomized events that may or may not happen, some item spawns that may or may not happen. And in the offline mode, we see that those item spawns are potentially semi-randomized. We see that some NPC interactions are going to be a little bit different, but a lot of the sort of scenario events themselves, as far as like, can you have the locked and unlocked doors from normal, but the NPCs from very hard or something like that, you can't seem to do that in offline. Now again, the online mode, I've seen some people playing, it looks fun. I haven't gotten a chance to experience the online myself, but it's always been the offline that enthralled me personally because of the utter hopelessness of these scenarios, you know? So, as far as I'm concerned, that sort of randomizer idea of being able to mix and match pieces from all of those, just have a sort of like, I don't know, true nightmare mode or something like that would be nice. There is technically a nightmare mode, an infinite mode, and whatever else. Like solo modes, panic modes in this one that, again, you unlock once you actually complete the game fully. Things that allow you to, let's say, go into scenarios solo, which seems to be canonically implied in some cases. You see them... You see stuff like an infinite ammo mode, which is really good for collecting all of the various special items to get the extra costumes and stuff. Things like having additional infinite zombies right from the get-go. There's a lot of those little modifiers that are available for you for repeat playthroughs, and some of them are insanely difficult. That's part of the reason that you could play with 4 people online. But yeah, I would love to see that sort of soft randomizer of sorts type of option put in there. Additionally, like just the utter variance would be very nice. It's already nice going through the various difficulties. I just would love to see that as an unlockable. Additionally, I would love to see more difficulties available from the very start, because it does take quite a while to get through these different difficulties, and a lot of PSP ports at the time did that sort of thing, where the additional difficulty modes, and not even PSP ports, this actually goes on to other ports as well, like for example, the New Game Plus options for something like XCOM Enemy Unknown. The later versions of the thing actually gave you all of your, or not all of, it gave you most of the stuff that new players would want to go back to the game for, of the New Game Plus options right from the get-go. Like the original PC version of XCOM, you had to beat it once in order to unlock second wave mode. If you, let's say, got the Vita version, you got about a third of the second wave options, stuff like training roulette, stuff like stat randomization, country budget randomization, stuff like that. You got all of those right from the get-go, but if you wanted the other stuff like complete losses of inventory, or things like making your power consumption costs extremely high and stuff like that, you had to actually beat it on certain difficulties, and it gave you stuff as you were kind of ready for it, you know? So either way, it would not be out of the norm at all to have it start with all the difficulties already unlocked. I would figure something similar to what happens when you transfer a File 2 save back to File 1, wherein it at least has the option to unlock them all right away, even if it doesn't necessarily give you the points. It's actually a fun little thing that might be a glitch, might be a quality of life feature, but like all of the hidden costumes from 1 and stuff like that, you don't have to go back and find all the special items in 1. Instead, you can just take a File 2 save, transfer it to File 1, transfer it back, and now you just have the option to buy them. So it would be good to see something like that, except with all of the difficulties and stuff like that, maybe some of the optional modes, just would be good to see right away. And then so 3 more things that I think would be really useful here. So going back to that previous point here, you'll notice that that if we go back to this one, Saves have always been a thing in File 2. So there's one more piece of information that gets misunderstood a lot, saying that you can't save in the middle of these scenarios despite their extremely high difficulty. That was a scenario, that was a File 1 problem. That was fixed in File 2, where as long as you don't save it again, you can go back and reload your save. So if you do particularly well on a high difficulty, you can just sort of checkpoint that shit and keep on going, okay? And this is almost essential if you're playing online. Or offline rather, because like on very hard, you just have moments where it's like just complete Leroy Jenkins through an entire area that's completely full of enemies, trying to just do backwards dodges the entire way, hoping that you somehow don't die. Like there's just some cases where it's extremely rough. Like the entire walk up to here was just hectic as hell because I only had like a few bullets left for this gun. Running up to this door was super stressful, which is actually the next point that I want to bring up. Keys should be used automatically. I know it's a thing that they wanted to make it more stressful in this one, that you don't automatically open every door with your keys. But look at these two dogs right here. These two dogs followed me up to this door, okay? This meant that I get to this door, 3 different attempts, I get to this fucking door, and I'm sitting here, inventory, and get knocked out of the inventory. Inventory, and I get knocked out of the inventory. And then just basically get chewed to death. Because I can't get the key out of my damn pocket. So it would be good to see that kind of stuff automated. It also would be good to see Alyssa's lockpick potentially having a bit more information as far as how it actually works. Hell, for all I care, just like make it so that it just has a random duration or something. Don't do this whole choosing a lockpick and hoping you pick the right one thing, because they do have a specific one that works. They just won't tell you what it is, and that's annoying. So that would be good. Another thing, as far as their starting item, I feel like it probably would not be out of the question, especially if doing it fully offline there. Which, by the way, I'm just going to wait for the elephant real quick. Here, go ahead and use that, please.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, don't use bug spray. What the hell are you doing, dude? You'll notice, by the way, in this case, one of my AI companions just, like, left to go do something somewhere. So if all of your people know each other, they'll follow each other around, but if they don't like each other very much, they will split up, go off in different directions. Sometimes they'll solve puzzles for you, sometimes they'll just turn up dead, who knows. But it is really cool to have that sort of like buddy cop moment of going in with like 3 different RPD members and just having them reenact Super Troopers. I literally had one attempt at this. I'll see if I end up finding the clip again. In which there was just a guy that decided to go swim and have a swim with the alligators. And he ended up going out there. He ended up trying to escape the alligator, but he was trying to also lead it away from us. And he kept going in circles, getting eaten over and over while I was trying to test out the range on the inbuilt handgun, because somebody told me it has kind of secret hidden range and whatnot. Also, part of the reason that we went in here, there's no lions in this upcoming area, but there's just like hyenas and stuff. Again, take all of that random variation and whatever else, and just allow for having a full random difficulty mode. Just have it in there. Full randomization of items, full randomization of events, and there you go. The perfect version. As far as I'm concerned, I would take that over a multiplayer version any day, because I don't want to sit there waiting for people to join rooms or, have issues with somebody trolling or what have you. Instead, I want to be able to just kind of go into this and, play it like this. Also, this probably has the best handling of how to deal with aerial enemies in the series. Just auto-aim them nice and away.
Come on.
Yeah.
Try to cover this guy while he escapes. Come on, Mr. Gator. No. This guy's handgun supposedly has better range. Oh, it totally does, huh?
Come here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is quickly turning into hot rods. Or not hot rods, what the hell was it? Super Troopers. Dude, come on.
Come on.
Yeah.
Get over here.
Come on. Excuse me. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not coming back. So I could reload this gun, because I dropped I picked up a magazine off the ground, but I didn't have time to reload it out there. So it would be good to be able to quick access doors. It would be good to know more about the lockpick. It would be good to potentially have a noise for hidden items because there's a lot of hidden items out there. And it would be good to have some kind of like noise or indicator of some sort that they're out there. Alright, there we go. Pop that guy. Yeah, we're screwed. This is not going to end well. Shoot. There we go. Do the dodge, do the dodge. Do the dodge, awkwardly slide up these stairs, moonwalk that shit. Alright, anyway, let's see. It would be good to have, like, if they do manage to do the actual online thing, obviously, proper voice chat, that's something that people have requested for a long time for this one, so that would be a very obvious gimme. But more information on how the AI is reacting would be nice. Just like a bit more information. But the last thing that I want to mention is ad-lib. So you notice how there were all those little lines popping up at the bottom of the stage there? That there were additional lines constantly popping up every time you did something. There were additional lines when I was going and lockpicking that one door there. So your characters have ad-lib lines that they'll do depending on their situation in general. Okay? So depending on what they're up to, there's actually different hints that they'll give you in every scenario that you run into. So like they'll give you little hints as far as puzzles, as far as just like random inner monologue stuff. Like let's say you're lockpicking, and if you listen to her ad libs, you just hit triangle to listen to the ad libs. They will tell you what they're thinking, what's going on. And so they'll be like, oh, it'll just take another minute, or I can't rush this, which basically translates to, yeah, this ain't happening. Anyway, so I'll show that more in just a bit of a second here. So, I would love to see more of these ad-libs being automated. They are to some degree. I will say that they had more lines in File 1, as in they voice worked in more lines. But like you see, it's more of like an inner monologue in this one. It's like, what's the matter? Can't just stick around here. You know, what's wrong with that guy? Asking their friend if they're all right. Got to get a grasp of things, which is kind of a generic one. Asking if they found anything. Like, it would be good to see just a constant ticker of this stuff, because you'll notice whenever people are playing through this thing casually, they'll usually have that on all the time because it gives you a lot of additional context depending on the scenario. Where'd that fogey go? It gives you more of an idea of the personality of these characters. It gives you more of a clue as to what's going on.
No.
Interestingly enough, this actually was on the wait button in the previous one for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but yeah, you would just constantly have to click down your thumbstick, which presumably was destroying somebody's thumb, so they put it on triangle instead. But it would be really good to see that automated to some degree so that you can actually, you know, make more use of it. Dude. This is why people love playing as Kevin, because the headshot with a 1911 absolutely blows things to Kingdom Come. If this thing is an action RPG, this guy's the Paladin because this thing brings down the wrath of God. I also want to point out, one thing that's interesting is that the different scenarios will even have different camera angles. So, like, in this case, the camera angle is entirely different from the way that it was on normal, which is kind of throwing me off here because I just played it on normal. Your route through the woods might be potentially different, and this leads to this very eerie feeling, you know? It's like in this case... shoot. So in this case, she ended up getting herself zombified and then dying of the virus. That's not where that guy is. Another reason why people like using Kevin? The kick. Because he kicks something, and then blow it away. And then it's gone. Very fun, very fun. Love the totally not a Magnum. It's a Magnum with a charge up. It's like a... Oh shoot, she's back. Yeah, you can't auto-aim with that move, though. But, like, the movement on this thing is... Oh, crap. Is she an infinite zombie? Huh. Alright, how many heads do you have, Alyssa? She might actually be an infinite zombie. Huh, cool. Yeah, there's some enemies that are weirdly semi-unique. Like, some are just infinite zombies, some are going to be, like, crawling versions and whatever else. There's a lot of variation to these levels. Like, you can play through it a ton of different ways, and you'll just always find something new. It's part of the reason why people love replaying this, because there's just always more to discover in these levels. Like, even after you 100% something, did you actually 100% it? But yeah, this lady's got a lot of brains, I gotta say. Man. Anyway... so yeah, that's about that. That's what I'd love to, like, how I'd imagine a PSP remake kind of working. How I'd hope that something like that would work, and if they do end up re-releasing it on Steam someday, if they are forced to do an offline version, that's what I would hope it would look like, you know? I know it's imperfect if they don't put the online multiplayer in. I would love to see the online multiplayer, but honestly, if we're being completely blunt about it, I would actually prefer to see a single-player version with enhancements rather than the online version, because online stuff eventually dies. Offline, well, it's like Alyssa here. Anyways, that's about that. Y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.